I had the very random urge to talk to you all about cats. First of all, apologies for the sound of running water in the background. It's the fountain for our cat's water. So, if as that sound goes on, you find yourself suddenly needing to run to the bathroom with a surprising need to pee, I'm very sorry. Okay, so my wife and I love cats. I love having them and giving them a home. I love going to visit with the ones up for adoption. I love reading stories people share about their cats. I love keeping track of the progress injured and diseased cats have as shelters and vets do what they can for them. I even love the scent of cats as you hold them close. You've heard the expression crazy cat lady? I am the male equivalent. I am crazy cat man. Tonight, I thought to tell you some stories about cats I've known and loved and why I'm so close to them. Reading about people saying they have a certain totem animal. I never quite thought that about any one particular animal. I've long thought that about all animals, all of nature, that at different times in life there are different connections to be made and different experiences and things to learn. That said, however, I have always been particularly drawn to cats, and they to me, as you'll soon see, the most vivid, intense, and emotional dreams I have ever had have involved relating to cats. And at times, in fact, it might be specifically just 2 or 3 times, seeing my environment from a ground level view, from a cat's view. So, as we go, I will share some images of these truly magical creatures. So, back when my family and I lived in Columbus, Ohio, this was a year or two before we moved to central Oklahoma. My mom and my little brother and I were about to go on a little vacation to see some relatives that we live that were in Cleveland, so a couple hours away. Before we left, we noticed one of the neighborhood cats being taken care of by a neighbor had given birth. And, well, she had given birth a while prior to this. We just didn't realize it until just before. And we did something kind of mean to my dad. We gathered them up and put all of them with Mama in our bathroom because we knew he was going to be home in an hour or two. So he comes home to nobody but a new mama cat and her kittens. And he took care of them for a day or two until we got back. And then, quickly learned how to care for cats. But anyways, I'm starting here because that's where it all started for me. It wasn't long after there were 3 kittens. Mama did not want to stay inside. She was an outdoor cat, and the neighbor taking care of her called her Asia. There were 3 kittens that stayed inside with us. We named Marble and Tom, who looked like Tom from the Tom and Jerry cartoon, reminded us anyways, gray and white. And Sylvester, named after the other cartoon character, black and white. Very shortly after, Marble got outside, ran away, and we never saw her again. And that killed me. So at the time I was 10, or about to turn 10. Tom and Sylvester stayed with us throughout their lives. I'm leading somewhere big with this, with one of the two. We lived, let's see, when we first arrived here in Oklahoma, we lived with my grandmother and her then husband, at which time these guys were a year or two old, and they'd known nothing but indoor life, and he didn't want them in the house. So suddenly they were outdoor cats, and that killed me too. They lived right next door to a giant field, and I kept being assured, well, they'll be fine. Cats do this. They'll hunt. They'll get their own food. Nevertheless, my dad kept leaving food and water out for them. But as far as the cats were concerned, it's like, okay, so you don't want us in the house anymore. So they got used to that very quickly, and we lived in that house with them for, I think, something like 8 or 9 months that went on. And then, so this was summer of 1982 that we moved in there. We moved into our apartment 3.5 miles away about a year later. At that time, we quickly gathered up Sylvester. We didn't know when exactly they were going to keep coming back for food. Well, apparently Tom got used to outdoor life because we could not find him. And I begged my grandmother to just keep watch for him because as far as I was concerned, he was lost for good. And so Sylvester came with us. He wound up getting very sick. I don't remember with what. My dad didn't know how to break it to me. So he put off telling me about it, but he was with him when they had him put to sleep. We got to enjoy about another year with him in that apartment. But in that time that he was there with us, something amazing happened. We were all getting ready to go out somewhere. I don't know where. We stepped out the back door of our apartment. And then out the back door, the patio door, and there was Tom. He had tracked our scents and followed us to the new apartment. So I'm going to show you, in addition to the particular cats, here is an image of the distance he traveled. So I'm sure you've all heard about this kind of thing happening. In fact, cats traveling much longer distances to be with their families or their owner. 3.5 miles, it doesn't matter to me. It's just as amazing. I mean, especially to an 11-year-old kid who couldn't have imagined something like that being possible. He's just there all of a sudden. He found us. That was the most magical moment to me. So we had him another 10 years, and then he too got sick. In fact, I don't remember what it was, but we had to have him put to sleep. So that would have made him, somewhere around 11 or 12 years old. So Tom was the longest term cat I'd had. Was he possibly the longest term cat I have still ever had? I hadn't really thought about it till now. So much more recently, when my wife and I were living in an apartment in summer of 2017, we had seen a very young cat that sort of that phase between being able to call him a kitten and a cat. We had seen him a little bit when he was a kitten, and we kind of watched him get older, a little bit older, and a little bit bigger. We'd see him outside, and my wife started calling him Blue Boy. And we often saw him up in the tree. Good for him, staying away from raccoons and other cats, and God knows what else. There was a forest right behind our apartment, so we saw a lot of strays and cats that people would take care of, but that lived outside. And I'm telling you about Blue Boy as a prelude to something else, another really magical moment. So one day, she and I went for a walk. Now there's a sidewalk that goes between our apartments and the forest back there. And we're following the sidewalk, and we see ahead, we see Blue Boy, and he's on the sidewalk, but he's in front of somebody else's apartment, and he's out of breath. His tongue is hanging out, and he looks at us, and he's just exhausted. And I realize what happened. On the giant step, there were two big steps right in front of him, on somebody's porch. There was this kitten with her eyes shut. And I thought at the time her eyes were shut because she was so near having been newborn that her eyes had not opened yet. Little orange tabby. And as soon as I saw her, she was crying. Then that's the moment we heard her too, and we realized, and my wife and I looked at each other and we ran up there. But as soon as I had seen her, she was stumbling around. She can't see, and she fell off that step and landed on her side. And I thought, if I'd only got there a little bit quicker. Turns out she was fine, but that's why Blue Boy was so tired. We had just witnessed the end of his rescuing her. He was bringing her to the apartment where she couldn't, she was too small to have climbed this step. These were two big steps. He carried her in his teeth, the skin on the back of her neck, as cats do, and dropped her there because he knew somebody could help her. And we got there right at that moment, right after that moment. So it was like he was passing the torch to us. And we picked her up and took her immediately home. We didn't want to handle her too much because we didn't know how newborn she was. And we called our vet that we use for our two cats. And thankfully, she was able to see us immediately. One of her assistants came in, was actually the one who helped us. She took her into another room, said, let's find out what the problem is. I said, my big concern, get her fed, because the whole time she had slept in our arms. We had both taken turns holding her. My big concern was, was it okay for us to touch her, being that young, and get any fleas or anything else, anything that might be crawling on her off. So there were some fleas. But when she walked back in the room with that kitten, what had happened was, her eyes could open, but they had sealed shut again, just with eye gunk. It had sealed shut and glued her eyes shut. So they cleaned that out. And I see her little eyes looking at me, trying hard to, gain sight in general again. And one of the other vets in that office, who was at the time busy with somebody else, but this other girl, this vet's assistant who was helping us, went to go get some advice from her, and they were talking a bit. This other vet wound up adopting her. She took her home that day. And this was a rare thing. It was a female orange tabby cat. I didn't know at the time that that was a rare thing to have a female orange tabby. So, I often think of her, obviously, and Blue Boy, little hero. He rescued her. We couldn't have done anything for her, and she wouldn't have the life now that she has without him. And God knows what became of him. We never saw him again. Hopefully he's fine being taken care of by some of the residents in the apartments. So I mentioned dreams earlier. My cat Esther, this long, slick black cat. You need her origin story first. So I have a friend named Scott, who his grandparents used to own a giant building downtown, a 3-story building that served as an auto repair shop. But his family did some other business there too. And I used to often hang out with him there because he lived there. That way, he could go rent free and save some money. But up on the 3rd floor, you have to understand this was an old building. Up on the 3rd floor, there were a couple of cars parked. See, it had a giant freight elevator. So, you could drive a car into that and then bring it up and park it in there. So there were several cars parked up there. Huge building, huge wide open space. That's where he lived, up there. So one day, he's taking out the trash behind the building, and he could see the garbage men pulling up. In the dumpster was Esther. There was a cat who had given birth in there. And so he got them all out, and Mama, and come to think, I don't even know what became of Mama or the other kittens. Knowing him, I'm sure he just did what he could to get them all homes or to shelters or something, but he wound up keeping one of the kittens. This was sometime mid to late 90s. Yeah, so Esther, she didn't have that name yet. I don't know what he was calling her. I think just Kitty, something like that, something obvious, generic. Had her for a year or 2 or possibly 3. Then he met the woman who was to become his wife, who they've now been together for 20 plus years. He was going to go traveling with her in Sweden. And it was going to be a long time. He needed to get her somewhere. I had just moved into my own apartment, just got a new roommate, and I gladly took her. And she became my best friend. Now, I mentioned dreams earlier. This is where one of them comes in. So it was 98 or 99 that he brought her over to me, and he left. Yeah, she became my best friend. She had this funny... in fact, I posted a video, come to think, of myself playing guitar and her talking to me. I think it bothered her that I played guitar, because she would come and stand on my thigh and put her paws up here and kind of stop, pat her paw on the neck of the guitar and just wah. I had her about 10 years. I can't even talk about how she left this world. It wasn't getting hit by a car. She didn't catch a disease or anything like that, but forgive me for not stating the actual particular reason. I'll end up I had to have her put to sleep. Just trust me. If I explained the reason right here to you all, I would just lose it on camera, and I don't think either of us want that. So that was 2008 that she left us, and for the next 2 years, roughly, I had a kind of a chaotic time in my life. I moved around a lot. I didn't really have a home. I didn't know where I wanted to live. I went to stay in Houston for 5 months. My mom was going through a rough time, and I was taking care of her and just being with her, and it was good for me to get out. And then when I came back, and my dad owned this interesting little old, like in the old part of town, some of the earliest houses built. I stayed in this unique little duplex. It looks like a normal house, but you know, with a single front door, but you walk in that front door, and then it immediately goes up a set of stairs, and then on either side of the stairs are two different, essentially, apartments. And then once you go in, they're like efficiency apartments. So it's just the one main room with a very small bathroom and kind of a normal sized kitchen considering the rest of it. So it was while living there, and I quickly got a data entry job, and I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do? Where exactly am I going to stay here in Oklahoma City this time? So it was during this that I had the most vivid, intense, and emotional dream I've ever had. Some of you are going to roll your eyes when I say what I'm about to say, and some of you are going to think, okay, well, it's nice that you felt as if that happened, but I'm here to tell you this actually happened. I have no need to dress up the way I tell this or what actually happened. You know, when people say, well, you tell somebody a dream, and they say, well, that was just a dream. I don't know what anybody thinks the word just does to the rest of that sentence in almost every case when you use the word just. Basically, Esther showed me heaven. So let me just tell you the dream. I was wandering around in a backyard, which come to find out, you know, when I think back on the visuals of it, and the visuals of what I'm looking at right now, was the backyard of our current house, which we just bought a year ago. I was walking around in the backyard. There were a couple of people over, I think some family having a get-together, a barbecue or something. And I see this vivid, gotta say it 3 times for maximum effect, redness coming from an area between the two fences of that separates our backyard from the people that live behind us. And I walk closer, and there's Esther. She's laying on a red blanket, deep, like blood red, and yet there was a brightness to it that blood doesn't have. She was laying on that, and it had etched in the blanket was her name. It said Esther, as if to let me know, you know, there is no confusion. This is Esther. Which even I recall while having that dream, it was there for my clarity, because obviously it's Esther. I'm looking at her, the way she gets up and walks over to me and is crying the way she used to and meowing. Obviously I know that's her, and yet I see the word there. So I'm meant to know that, and I pick her up. Heaven is emotional knowledge. I picked her up, and I knew in the dream she had actually died, but here she is. So somehow that didn't matter anymore. And she immediately just laid her chin like this on my shoulder as I held her, and I put my head down against hers, and I picked up, and suddenly my surroundings didn't matter anymore. We walked around the side of the house as I'm holding her, and for some reason, this part I don't understand, only in a way. We walked into the house next door, which was empty and decrepit. There was rotting wood. There were nails sticking up everywhere. There was a lot of grayness in that house. And it was dusty. I don't know why we were walking in it, but it was like a further affirmation that surroundings don't matter. This is real. Nothing else matters. We're together. And I wish I had the words for the certainty, that is the best word for it, that was there through a shared feeling there. And the only thing akin to it I know is my wife and I finding each other. And so it ends, I'm holding her, and it's like I can't hold her tight enough, but you don't want to do it too tight, obvious reasons. And yet, as I'm holding her, instead of it getting tighter, she's going into me. And I can see her physically disappearing, but she went right here. I literally brought her into my heart, and that's when I woke up. And I woke up and I just started crying like never before. And I said out loud, that was mean. To have experienced that and then to wake up to her not being here, while at the same time knowing she is here. And she wanted me to know that. And I needed to know that. Some of my loneliest times, Esther was there. And I have some regrets about how I was with her, because there was so much I didn't know or didn't think about with general cat care. I didn't take her to a vet very often. When my roommate also got a cat, her name is Apple. It's a calico, crazy calico. And we also got a third cat. I did. And we're going to backtrack in time. I'll tell you about that third one. So we had 3 at one time in here. This is where we get to the hard part that I can't bring myself to say. How she left. Just know that she left peacefully. But that dream, I wish I could share what the stuff that words can't do. That's the thing that I experienced in that is what I want everyone to have in whatever way they need to. When people say dreams aren't real, well, you do experience in dreams. You wake up with the residual feeling of what you've been through. What you're feeling is real. So, the third cat that I mentioned, around that same time, late 90s, I mentioned my friend Scott. He's one of the friends. I have great friends throughout my life that I still have. Another one of those, her name is Stephanie. For a short time, she lived down the street from me, about a 15-minute walk. So every once in a while, I would walk down there. I enjoyed doing so, but the reason for it was because I didn't have a car. And one day, I'm walking home, and this scraggly little guy goes like this. Rah. It's like, yo, what's up? Rah. And I smiled, and I said, hey, come here. Little did I know. And he did. He came up and let me pet him. Kind of rubbed back and forth between my on my shins. And it's like, okay, well, nice to meet you. I'm going home. It's one of those things, like a movie scene. I look back, and he had been following me. And he stops. I gotta go, bud. A little while later, turn around, same thing. It's like, I wasn't doing anything. So 4 or 5 times of that, I get to where I need to cross a major street. And I thought, okay, this is happening. I kneeled down, said, come here. He did. He walked up my legs, came right up here. I held him. I walked him to my apartment, and I enjoyed about 6, maybe up to 7 years with him. So I had a conversation with Stephanie about this, very shortly after. She said, oh, you took him home. She said, yeah, everybody in the neighborhood's been calling him mange. Of course, it turns out he didn't have mange. He was getting old. He was older than she realized, or many people did. So yeah, 6, maybe up to 7 years I had him, something like that. And the sweetest old guy. Called him Newt after Sir Isaac Newton. Embarrassingly, at first, for some reason, I assumed he was a girl. I don't know why. I think why, I don't know. But at the time, I was calling him Althea, named after the Grateful Dead song. I want to say after the mythological figure, but it was after that song. And then I saw what was between his legs, like, oh, Althea's a boy. And Newt was I liked the simplicity of it. But I often, he had an old guy sound too. He always did that. Rah, rah. And when you go pet him, he'd really go into it. He did not want your hand to leave. So, 2005. So I had he and Esther at the same time, and it was while living in that apartment, that first apartment, between 98 and 2001, that my roommate, second roommate I had at that time, he got a cat too, the Calico, Apple, and we'll get back to her. It was in 2005, let's see, Yeah, he had just moved out into his own place. We just decided, okay, we're both doing well enough in our jobs that we can go on our own. Who doesn't want that? Very shortly after he moved out, Newt started acting very weird. I found him one day. He was laying on the kitchen floor. He was doing this on the floor. He was burying his face in between the floor and the cabinet door, the corner under the cabinet. And he was like he was trying to burrow his way under there. I had no idea what was going on. I called another friend of mine over who was studying to be a vet, who is one now. She came over and she immediately knew what was going on. He was just old, and he was seeking to literally crawl away and die, which I didn't know at the time that commonly happens. He knew he was dying, and he was looking to just hasten the process. He had dust and kitchen floor stuff stuck all over his mouth, and it's like he was already mentally elsewhere. So my friend came over. She told me about that, and right then we went to my vet, and he was given the shot. We had to end his suffering, and I'm grateful that she went with me, and we both held him as he went, and I was able to kiss him and tell him I love him in that final moment, how much I love him and will always. So I got to be a retirement home for an old guy who may otherwise never have lived indoors. So a lot of this happened, these stories I'm telling you, a lot of this happened when my wife and I lived in our apartment together before we bought this house. There was a ridiculous and extraordinarily rare storm that we got one day in summer of 2017. Is that when it was? Was this around the same time that we found that little orange tabby girl that was blind? It was around there sometime. No. It was later. This had to be 2018 or 19. So this storm knocked down trees and parts of trees everywhere. It had fallen on people's cars. It was blocking most roads, whole trees and branches, and it was so surreal. So after that, it was the next day, my wife went out for a walk, and she saw this cat looking bewildered, his wide eyes just rawr, rawr. It was as if he suddenly found himself standing there, and this was in our apartment complex. And she held out her arms, kneeled down. He came right over, let her pick him up. No collar, no identifying information. We took him to the vet, no microchip. So we got immediately to work trying to find someone good who could take him in. Now, we already have two other cats of our own. We'll get to those, Nova and Philippe. And Philippe at the time was a new addition to our family. In matter of fact, that knowing that brings me to the right time. This was, since we had him, this was 2019. So we brought him in, and I had no other option but to keep him in the bathroom. Now, I didn't want to close him away from everybody, just lock him up. So I wound up we took turns spending time with him in the bathroom, because our oldest cat, Nova, she would have been vicious, and God knows what would have happened had they been around each other. And our other cat, Philippe, who was very young at the time, just a couple of months old, God knows if we had yet to see a vicious side of this new one that would come out when the other cats are together. So it was hard, but I don't regret a second of it. I spent 3 consecutive nights in the bathroom with him. I mean, I slept in there with him. And it had to be the bathroom because we were already needing to keep Nova and Philippe separate. We were getting them familiar with each other. They had to, so that meant Philippe in our bedroom and Nova out in the rest of the apartment. There was no other room. Just no way to do it. We didn't have the stuff to block off, and oh boy. So I spent 3 nights with a sleeping bag and a bunch of pillows in the bathroom with this boy. And during the day, I would go in there. My wife and I would take turns going to hang out with him. And I would pick him up and bring him out. But I had to make sure I was holding him. And he seemed fine because he was still in a kind of bewildered state from whatever he had been through up until that storm or during the storm. But there was a thing happening. There was a connection immediately made with my wife and this little boy. Anyways, we started calling him Draco. He was black with a little tuft of white right here. So by the 3rd day, I thankfully I had been working from home since late 2016, so I was able to get on the phone while I worked. And finally we got, I agreed to meet with somebody who wanted to take him in. He lived out on a farm, and he had a son who wanted a cat too. And they both came over, and we liked them. We found a way, I don't remember how, to let this boy out in the living room for a while. I think we dragged a dresser or something over to block off the living room from the kitchen so he could have some time just in a different room. And that day, his last day with us, a deck of tarot cards I had ordered just came in. One I was particularly excited about, the El Gran Tarot Esoterica came, and he, I don't know if I should say played with the cards or worked them with me, but I would lay him out, and he would put his paw on a certain one and pull it out, and that was fun. That was a good last moment with him. So anyways, this old guy and his son came over, and they seemed great. They took him, and I heard from him a couple days later, and they had renamed him Tux. So another rescue, another case of a cat who found us. Again, a walk in our apartments. This time it was both of us again, my wife and I. This girl we found, she, I think, also had fleas. Found this adult cat, very friendly. Came right up to us. She was just wandering around back between the apartments and the forest. And we took her in, again, same vet, able to see her the same day, checked her up, and seemed healthy, just needed a little bit of cleaning up, but no, there may have been fleas. If so, they took care of it immediately. We took her home, and same thing, put her in the bathroom, took turns staying with her. Same day, I was able to get her a new home. We immediately started calling her Venus. So, well, yeah, we had taken her. I already talked about that. It was just a second ago. We brought her to the vet. Yeah, quick health checkup. She's fine. I was able to get her to a new home with an old friend of mine, a woman I used to work with in a restaurant. So she actually comes and goes in their house and out in the backyard as she pleases. But yeah, this girl has a couple of kids, so it's perfect family life for her to be around. Again, no, we did the microchip check. Nobody, as far as, unless somebody owned her and didn't bother putting a collar with identifying information on it, or just didn't bother to get a microchip, then how's anybody going to know? Anybody else who finds them, and like us, who wants to make sure they're taken care of. So anyways, Venus was given a home. Again, same apartments. Crazy record temperatures for central Oklahoma. Loads of snow, ice, sleet, slush, all of it. This was the kind of thing I haven't seen since I lived in Cleveland, Ohio. There was a cat who used to come crying at our window. We had a couple of lawn chairs sitting on our patio by our front door, and beneath one of those chairs we had been leaving food and water for the several stray cats we knew of that come around. And we'd gotten used to seeing this little guy and how loud his cries were. I thought it was that sound of a cat who's looking for a hookup. But it had, the particular meow was that of it sounded like a female in heat. I had not heard that sound before from a male cat in that way, that intensely. And he would do this a lot. He did it for a long time. Come to find out, there was a family who lived on the upper floor of a building behind us, and they let him in and out of their apartment. How do I begin this? So it was during these during that storm when or right after it. Actually, that storm came and went. That I found out about this family through another neighbor, that he was with them. So she told me where they live, and I went over and I see an open cat carrier sitting outside in front of their door. And I thought, what's the idea? Is he supposed to just go in there and sit for you to and wait for you to notice that he's in it while he's freezing? No, he's going to keep moving around. Come to find out, too, this family was pretty evil. So I went out looking for him when they claimed they couldn't find him in this ridiculous weather. And I would see him, and he would come and go, and this went on for days. He was just out in this stuff, and they couldn't get him, and I don't think they were looking very hard. They were just telling me they were. I was trying so hard to get him. Well, I finally got him one day, and I brought him to them. Well, then they let him back out as usual in this weather. So, oh, well, that's what he wants to do. So, come to find out, the bad weather came back and got worse. They all left one night. And now, what I'm about to tell you, I didn't find out about till later from the other neighbor I was telling you about. She saw all of them leave. And after having put this cat out on their back patio, now remember they live on the upper floor, shut the door. They went outside, came out their front door, got in the car, and left. So they locked him out of their apartment during below freezing temperatures. And he can't go anywhere. He's stuck on that patio. And this neighbor was trying to find a way to get a tall ladder, somebody to help her. She would have gone and just taken him. Well, I didn't find out about that till later. And they stopped returning my texts. And so I decided I was just going to find a way to get him and give him to somebody who would love him. And we managed to do that. I posted about it. And there was a woman who originally thought this was her cat that she lost almost a year previously, and she had been looking for him ever since. She was convinced this was him. And at first I had told her about the family that has him. Well, then I realized how evil they were and what kind of things they were doing, and I called her. Well, no, I didn't call her. I messaged her online, and she said, "You know what? Can I just take him? I realize it's not him, but..." And I said, "Yeah, please." She and her son came over, and thank goddess, she took him. And she said, this is the same kind of cat. You know, this looks so much like..." She knew it was not him when she finally saw him, but they needed a new one. Her little boy, he wasn't so little, but watching his eyes get big, it's like, that's one of those things where everything is worth it. And they took him. She sent me a text the next day. They had named him Alejandro. I love it. So I mentioned Apple, the calico cat that my former roommate had, that was, around my two cats, Newt and Esther. She was crazy. I don't even know what to tell you about her, except because she went to live with my roommate after he moved out. So she was with us for, oh boy, I guess that was about 5 years. Unfortunately, I don't think he treated her very well. She had gained a lot of weight, and her attitude, everything was very different. When I had gone over to visit one day after he'd moved out and he had her there, something was wrong. So I've got a lingering bad feeling about that. If I was going to say anything particular about Apple, I don't know what it was, other than she would be just sitting there. Maybe you've heard typical things about calicos, but that's all true. She would just be sitting there and suddenly freak out about something and claw up your skin. But I miss her now. And she was close to Esther. I guess we'll end up with this one. I'll tell you about our current kiddos, Philippe and Nova. Now, Nova, I will link to... I had made a video about her 10 years ago, 2012. My God. time. Shortly after I first found her, she followed me home. I'll let you hear that story, her story, because I tell it there. So I will link that below. It was called Nova, Substantiation of a Dream. Now back to the dreams with cats. I had dreamed her, specifically her, shortly before I got her. Nova is a truly magical girl. But anyways, go watch that video if you haven't seen it yet to know Nova's story and how I got her. Okay, so back in spring of 2019, my wife, Inanna, had a missing feeling. Truly like missing something or someone you've long been away from, but this was for someone we had not yet met. You know what I mean? I feel like anybody watching this would know. She knew it was regarding an animal, though. So we went looking around. Maybe a kitten? Yeah, she felt like she needed to find one too. And we went to a PetSmart doing some adoptions. And we found a trio of 3-month-old brothers that we were playing with. And there was a girl beside us looking to adopt too. And when finding out that they had been bottle fed and no information was to be found or what happened to the mother and why that was so, we got all the more interested. And yeah, that fact just lingers too. So we're playing with them and it gets narrowed down. There are 2 of them that are drawn to us, that seem most appreciative of the attention. And then one of these 2 starts crawling on me. This girl that was there beside us said, I think he's found his humans. She was right. They had been calling him Leonard, which is a great name for a cat. But we got home and my wife had kept thinking the name Philippe when looking at him, so that stuck. Now we call him by a full name. We call him Philippe Leonard Smith. So that, in taking him home, that alleviated her missing feeling. It was something we both needed at that time. Our girl Nova, who is here with me now, she's behind the camera, the computer. She very much disagrees, though. Here we are 3 years later, and she has not warmed up to him in the slightest, though they have their moments. Sometimes, when she's half asleep and realizes that he snuck up on her, they will sniff at each other's faces or even sit together at the window. And Inanna and I sort of excitedly smile at each other when this happens. It's like, is this it? Finally, something. We're hoping for some companionship someday between them. And for the record, since some of you are already thinking it, yes, we did go through the whole scene of introducing them slowly by not letting Nova see him at first, but by bringing him to another room behind a closed door with separate feedings. Actually, he was in our bedroom and she was out in the rest of the apartment. You got a taste of that when I told you about Tux or Draco. So yeah, while we fed them at the same time, different bowls, food and water on different sides of the same door, so they would smell each other, get to know each other's scent, the regularity of it when it was feeding time. So yeah, Nova gets extremely ferocious and territorial, particularly at first. So we kind of went through hell with keeping them separate and moving furniture around to keep them separate. And then one of us would sleep with one, the other slept with the other. As this happened, it was horrible, but we really were determined to get them used to each other. I want to say it never quite happened at the same time that it did. She's just, again, ferocious and territorial. With him being so comparably young, he always wants to play, and so things turned around quickly. He became the one who tries to jump and play with her, which causes her to hiss and run away, leaving him looking around like, what do I do? What just happened? She tolerates him now, but things are still kind of the same. I mentioned that I will link the video about Nova below, but I'd like to add that I also made a video called something like Everything You Need to Know About Adopting Cats or Kittens. And it's got tips from someone who's had cats all his life and who's long since been involved with countless rescues and facilitating connections between cats and either the families who'd lost them or new families or individual owners, where they'll get to know indoor home life, just a better life in general. Hopefully that's always the hope. It's always the idea. So this too will be linked below. I had to share this with you too. This is Bast, Egyptian Bast. Now you see her ears. So we've had this, got it at a local shop, her little clipped ears. This figurine keeps falling off of a piece of furniture back here. No matter how far back I put it or centered on this wide top surface of this piece of furniture, we'll be sitting in the other rooms and we'll hear it fall to the floor. Now, neither of our cats can jump that high. I don't know why this is a regular thing, only this thing. Nothing else ever falls off of there. I put it in different places up there. Anyways, it keeps falling. That's why her ears are chipped, but she looks like she's got clipped ears, as if she's been through the trap, neuter, release program and returned with the clipped ears to show for it. So that is really all I wanted to do with you tonight, is to share some cat stories. I want to thank you all for joining me and listening to this. In conclusion, don't even get me started on dog rescues.